a book. I'm just going to read the whole thing to y'all tonight. But for everybody that don't know me, my name's Brody. I'm 24 years old. I'm 6'8", and sometimes I'm 5'11", depends on whether the pastor's around or not. But, I know, and I'm becoming CR, when I'm home every now and then, every so often, and it makes a difference. And you say, well, you attend CR, and a lot of the people that attend this is on drug court, addiction and all that. But I've never had an addiction in my life. And you say, well, you've never had an addiction in your life. Why are you here? But recovery is what we're all celebrating.
Right.
And recovery is to return to a normal state of mind, health, or like strength. But there's also another definition for it, which is to gain control of something that has been lost or stolen.
Right.
And I've never been through addiction, but addiction, if you really look at it, whenever you're recovering from it, it's really gaining back what that addiction stole from you.
Right.
Because you lose your health, sometimes you lose your family, and among other things that you can always rebuild, but it takes recovery to rebuild that.
Right.
And recovery is recovering from loss. Although I'm 24 years old, you can look at me and say, oh, you shouldn't have that big of a testimony because you've only been on this earth for 24 years. But I've faced loss in my life. And I've been to a point where most adults has never been. And I might get a little emotional because this is my first time ever, laying this out in front of people. Because for a long time, before I ever agreed to God to do this testimony, I said, God, I've got questions, and I want them answered before I ever do it. And the first question was, God, why did this happen? Second question was, God, why did I have to hurt so bad during it? And I prayed and I prayed. And everybody talks about being on a mountaintop. And a mountaintop, it's described as some place that you want to achieve because it's so beautiful. But that's only whenever you're looking from a valley can you see the beauty of a mountaintop.
Right.
But when you're standing on that mountaintop, you're not looking at the beauty of the mountaintop. You're looking at the beauty of the mountain of the valley that you just come through.
Right.
So that big raging river that you're looking at in that valley turns to a little tiny stream. Something you thought was just going to take you over becomes so small. And that wildlife that was in that valley that you felt in the time was going to just eat your flesh, so it was just trying to kill you in that valley, becomes like ants, but they're so beautiful because you're looking at it from a distance. You're looking at it from your mountaintop.
Right.
But and I'm just gonna warn you that some of the things I say tonight can give you a thought in your head that, oh well, if I come to God and I lay it all down, God's gonna take everything away from me. I'm not gonna feel no pain no more. I'm not gonna feel any hurt. And I'm not saying that because the will of God, sometimes if you back into it, and I was raised in church and I was always told, you want to stay in the will of God, you want to stay in the will of God. That's something that my grandparents always told me. And I love them to death, but they always failed to say sometimes that will of God is going to drag you through the mud. Sometimes you're going to get dirty while being in the will of God. So I'm not saying it's going to take away your pain. Matter of fact, you might go through more. All I'm saying is there's going to be a purpose for the pain that God, lets be on your life. And I had those two questions in my life, and it didn't really ever feel like God was answering them. And growing up, we didn't have the best childhood. Our lives was riddled with drugs and alcohol and adultery that we had no part in. We was in a valley of someone else's making. And we just had to live in it because, we lived with our mom most of the time, and we didn't want to let go of her because who knows when the last time we could have ever seen her was. Because she was in addiction, and addiction, whenever you're in addiction, you never want to admit that you're in addiction.
That's right.
But the ones around you can see it.
That's
I was talking to my sister today, and she said, some of the places that our mom allowed us to be, we could have been in that place, and I can remember going to places where, people have been killed, over drugs, over senseless and pointless things that, we could have been caught up in a raid in one of these houses. All because our mom was so disconnected from God. And the only connection that I've had to God, you could probably look and say, oh, well, he's probably been brought up in it. He's probably been raised in it. He probably had a good family pouring it into him. The only connection I had was a weekend trip to my nanny and papa's. My papa, whenever I was young, we went to a small church, and I can remember him getting down at the altar, and I would go lean down beside him, and that's where he taught me how to pray. And my nanny would always pour into us, God, 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 God. That's what she wanted us. That's what she wanted the outcome of our lives to be, was nothing but God.
Come on.
And we was in this life, and I looked at it as God, I'm young and I didn't ask to be here. This must be my valley. But little did I know that that was not my valley. That those things would not even compare to the valley that was about to break me spiritually, physically, and mentally. And on April 23rd of 2019 is the first day I stepped into my valley. And on April 24th of 2019 is the first time that I've ever held my baby boy in my arms. It was also the last. God unexpectedly took him, and from that day, I was very angry. And this kid that his grandparents had poured into all of his life had, tried to shape me into what God wanted me to be. I said, God, I can't trust you anymore. I said, God, if you can't come if you can't come to my rescue whenever I need you the most, how can I trust you? And I was 20 years old at the time. I was newly married, and it was a struggle. It was a trial. It was a tragic loss that broke me. And I couldn't hardly think straight, and I was just walking around like a living zombie. And the crazy thing about it was nobody knew. Because all of my life I've been a loving person, I've been a caring person, and I taught myself how to hold that facade. Even when I'm sad, even when I'm down, because I spent my childhood doing it for my mom, because she would cry and she fought depression, and I would be there for her, even though it was taking the same toll on me. And you can say, oh, you was young, but that's the ones you need to check on the most, is the young people.
Right.
Because that's the ones that's not going to talk to you about what they're going to.
Right.
And every day before God took my son, I would get down. I had a little bench at the foot of my bed, and I would get down, and I would say, God, have your way in his life. Do everything, God, in your ability, God, to keep him. God, shape him in the man that you need him to be. Use him for your will. But never did I remember in that time of loss me saying those words. Because whenever he took him for his will, I said, God, I don't trust you.
Come on.
And, I like I said, I began to lose my trust in God. And I started to let pain and anger and distrust rule my life. And I started drinking, and I was never a drinker for fun, but I was a drinker because I'm hurt. And people don't tell you about mental pain and about emotional pain, as whenever you get this mental and emotional pain, you feel it physically. And you don't know it till you've been through it. You can look at somebody, and like Heather can be hurt so bad right now, and she can tell you that, but you don't know how she's really feeling until you feel that.
Right.
And you would be surprised how many people in this world actually walk around like that every day.
Right.
Like a lot of people in this room could be feeling that very pressure on their life right now. And you would never know it because society molds you to believe that. Hide your pain. Mental health has become such a big thing, and it seems like everybody has it, where whenever somebody really does have it, it becomes a little bit of a less thing. Because everybody's got it. Everybody's dealing with problems. So I walked around and I would drink, and I would drink. It wasn't that bad because I would still come to church. I was a lukewarm person. And it was all because I would come to church and I would dance and I would shout and say, God, move in my life. And whenever God would move in my life, I done everything I had to do to not feel it anymore. And I distanced myself from my wife and from everybody around me. I had a good job, paying good money. I quit. I lost my mind completely, and I was in a bind, and I quit a job, but then I was 3 notes behind on everything. I had the final notice on everything, and then finally I started driving a truck, and I'd go to church, and I would skip church. Church really didn't mean anything to me anymore. I just done it because that's what I was raised to do. So I'd go to church, and I'd come home, and I would drink. I would do whatever I had to do to take away that pain. And I started driving a truck. And I can remember whenever I started driving the truck, it got worse because I was gone. And that feeling of being a zombie, of being, disassociated with yourself, just being on the outside of yourself, looking into a person that you don't even know, hit me even harder when I was gone. I began drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking, and I wasn't doing it for fun. I didn't like drinking. And I can remember one night I got so drunk that I committed adultery. And that fell into something else, and that was something I was always raised not to do. That was something you didn't do. So that just added to the pain and the regret that I felt already, to the anger that I had in my heart already. I went on and went on and went on, and finally I come home and I told my wife, I said I'm sorry, but I told her what happened, and she forgave me. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake that ever happened, because just because somebody gives you forgiveness does not take away the pain that you're feeling. Right. And she forgave me, and I went on, but that pain was still there. I was driving a truck, and I can remember I'd park my truck, and my grandpa, my papa, would be there, and he'd back me into my little spot, and he'd tell me, he'd say, brother, let's take a walk with me, and we'd go back, and the cemetery where my son is buried is in the back of our field. It's fenced off, and we'd go back there, and he'd grab me up, and he'd cry with me, and I would pour so much into him. And you never know how much you rely on somebody. But on July 31st of 2021, that man that taught me how to pray and made countless trips where he'd get back at 1 o'clock in the morning just so we could go to church, he passed away. And that absolutely destroyed my life. I was on a downward spiral with rock bottom in sight. And I didn't like where I was going. And I distanced myself even further than I already was from everybody around me, because this man that, kept me at least on above water, he had been stripped away from me, so I didn't have that anymore. And I say, God, why? And there was no answer. And it frustrated me, so I would drink some more, and I began to, go to bars, and every time I'd get home, and we found the rock, and I'd come here, and I would dance, and I would shout, and I would scream. But God didn't answer me. And I didn't understand why. And finally, I just said, okay, I'm giving up. So I quit coming to the rock. I avoided everybody. Everybody would try to talk to me. I'd avoid, I'm doing fine, whatever. I would shake it off. And obviously, I wasn't doing fine. And I can remember one day I told my wife, I said, I want a divorce. I said, divorce, man, you're apostolic, or you claim to be anyways. And I was like, I know. But I felt at the time that I had a brand new baby girl at home and a very loving wife. And I felt at the time that I had done messed up too much in my life, and I was unstable, and my mind had done gone so bad that they did not deserve to even be around me. That I was just causing them more trouble that they couldn't, that they didn't deserve the pain that I was bringing them to their life. So I left. And I didn't see my baby girl for 5 months. And if you know me, you know that it's not because I didn't want to. It was because I felt useless. I felt like, she wouldn't be proud of the man I was because she wouldn't have. So I stayed away for 5 whole months, and I would drink every day. And it even got worse and worse and worse. And I was staying in the bars, and I was hanging out with my buddies. I wasn't coming to church because I didn't want what, everybody said that God had for me, because I didn't see that. I didn't see, people would tell me, oh man, living for God is so awesome, he does all this stuff for you. And I'm like, dude, you're a fool. Because you don't know what you're talking about, because I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I beat the floor down trying to get God to answer one simple question for me, and he wouldn't do it. And then one day, I met a beautiful woman with glasses and long teeth and big feet. She's pretty tall, and she's pretty awesome. And this girl, she was going to the bars with me, and she was partying and all that. And, she was doing it for fun, and me and her talked about it, and, she'd tell me that, I was going out for fun and all that, but I wasn't doing it for fun. We had two totally different, views on why we were doing it. I was doing it because I was in agonizing pain, and she was doing it because she just wanted to have fun. And all of a sudden, this girl that I thought was just, living in the world like I was, comes out and says, I was raised in a Pentecostal church. I'm like, really now? She's like, yeah, really. And then I was like, okay, well, let's go then. And months before this, I'd come back and I'd sat right over there, and Jacob Phillips was there preaching. And I've never told anybody this. It's the first time it's ever leaving my lips. As I sat right out there in that parking lot, because I was so hurt. And I told God, I said, God, this is going to be my last day on earth. Because I felt like I wasn't doing nothing. So as I attended my last church service on this earth, Jacob Phillips pulled me up close to him, and he said, the devil's scared that if you get in church, that you're going to start tearing down strongholds, and you're going to start breaking walls down. And I took that and said, God, I'll give you more time, but it's not going to be forever. And then just a few days after that, I met Emily. And God kind of started working in that situation. So we come to church, and now I'm here. And it goes back to those two questions. You say, well, you're giving your testimony, so you obviously got your questions answered. said, yes, because I was in my truck one day and I was telling Zach and them before this, you know, how God can move even through the online. You know, it's awesome to be here, but if you can't, just, you know, at least watch it. Because as Brother Bass preached one day about being spent, I was watching as soon as he started preaching about it. I threw my tablet down. I just started praying. I started crying because God spoke to me and He said I had to spend them because if I didn't, you would not understand the hurt that everybody in this world is going through.
Come on.
You wouldn't know loss. You wouldn't know nothing. You would freeze right on through life, not knowing anything. And God gave me that testimony because I'm now recovered from loss.
Come on.
So that means I've never been an addict, but I know how it is to lose. I know that same loss that some addicts feel of, man, I'm never going to get out of this hole. I'm never going to regain what I just had. And that was my first question. God, why'd you do it? And Brother Cody Marks preached just a few weeks ago. And God spoke to me before that, whenever I got with Craig about doing a testimony. God said, give me testimony. I said, no, God, I'm not going to do it because you haven't answered my question. God said, give you testimony. I said, okay, I try not to do anything, I try not to argue with God more than, twice. So I was like, all right, I'll go with it. And Brother Cody Marks preached about precious pressure. And I was right over there after, during the prayer time. I was bent over like this. And if you've never heard the voice of God, it's such a beautiful thing, but this one scared me. Because it was as He was speaking to correct my disbelief and my distrust. And He said, I'm the one that guided the rock from David's sling, and I'm the one that shut the mouths of the lions. How could you ever think that I would forsake you? And I've been over, and Sister Lambert put her hand on my back, and I've been over, and all of a sudden the tears started flowing because that's completely true. Because no matter what, God never left me in those times.
That's right.
And God told me, He said, just because Jonah was in the belly of the whale, his calling didn't change. And it spoke to me, and I was like, okay, God, I'm definitely going to give my testimony now. And I'm not the smartest person, but I'm working on that. One of these days, I'm going to be the smartest in my bedroom. Not this one, but God will move in mighty ways, and I've learned that. And this past year, I've grown in the Spirit more than I ever have in my life. I've heard the voice of God more than I ever have in my life. And God told me if I'd keep my eyes open that I would see Him move. And I was actually, Brother Leva and Shar and Victoria was standing right there whenever He said it. And I have not closed my eyes because I want to see God move.
Right.
This is my foundation.
Yes.
The Rock Church. I come to CR not because I'm addicted, but because I'm recovering.
Come on. Yeah.
CR, it's not only for the addicted, but it's for everybody.
That's right. Amen.
Everybody needs it. At first, Victoria started. She would come, and I would say to myself, I don't need that. I don't need it, but I was broken. I was a broken person sitting there saying, I don't need that.
Come on.
Constantly while I was sitting there begging God, take this away from me, take this away from me. And I've always been a very joyous, loving person. I try to pick people up, and I was broken myself. And the night I sat over there after Brother Cody Marks preached, and after God spoke to me, I got home, and I just went about my day, and then a few days later, me and Emily was sitting there, and I told her, I said, I can honestly say that I don't hurt anymore.
Thank you.
That although I face loss and although, I've been through things in my life, I can say I don't hurt anymore because God took it. Ever since that night, I've not felt hurt. I'm saddened by the loss of my papa and my son. But God only said those things were killing you because you wasn't looking at my will.
Come on. Right.
He said that I put you in my will, and then you cried, begging me to let you out of something that you begged me to put you in.
Right.
And people don't understand that. People say, God, I want to be in your will. God, I want to be in your will. God, let me do something for you. Not knowing, and me and Colton was talking about this, young guys, they want to be in God's will, but they don't look at the sacrifice that it takes.
That's right.
And I made the example of Brother Riley. I said, you could look at Brother Riley today and it looks like this man has never made a sacrifice in his life. But if you look underneath the surface at all the sacrifice that it took to get here,
That's right. Amen.
and all the sacrifice that it's going to take in the future to grow this place.
That's right.
I'm not talking about just growing the rock. I'm talking about growing CR.
Yes. That's right.
Because Brother Riley, his vision for the church is 7,000. About how many broken people you have in a church of 7,000.
Right.
About how many addicts you have in a church of 7,000.
Right.
How many people with losses in the church of 7,000.
Right.
God's going to need people to rise up and say, you know what? I want to be in your will no matter the sacrifice.
That's right.
No matter what I got to go through, no matter the valley. Because in the end, you're standing on your mountaintop and you're looking out. And like I said, that raging river that once looked like it was about to sweep you away, and the wildlife that was about to eat you, it all looks like just little things that was just in your past. It's nothing compared to what God's got for your future.
That's right. Amen.
I just want to thank everybody for coming out. I really hope that this empowers somebody, that it gives you a new aspect of the valley.
Yes.
A lot of people look at their valleys and the things they go through as, man, that was terrible. But I hope you start looking at it now as, man, that was so little. That was nothing.
That's right.
I hurt and I stumbled and I failed. And I got back up. And I kept going.
That's right.
Because just as Brother Jacob Phillips said, is whenever you get in here, you're going to start tearing down walls. Start throwing down strongholds.
Yes. That's right.
But it all takes the first step. And everybody in this room here, if you carry an addiction, if you carry a loss, you made the first step tonight by coming.
That's right.
Because the Bible says that faith without works is dead.
That's right.
And it also says if you have the faith as a grain of mustard seed to tell your mountain to move into the ocean. Ooh, sometimes God doesn't move your mountain. Sometimes God gives you the climbing gear to climb it.
That's right.
Because that is the works that it takes to push your faith up that mountain.
That's right.
And y'all all made the first step by coming here, because doesn't the Bible say we'll be made overcomers by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony?
That's right. Yes.
So obviously we have some people that want to become overcomers.
Yes.
I thank everybody for coming out and listening.